All right, on this week's episode, I-501-CU, I am interviewing Nelle Miller, the president and CEO of All Faiths Food Bank. But listen to her career. She was an entrepreneur, very successful. The way she was raised, the organization she's involved in, she's done a little bit of everything in the for-profit and nonprofit sector. You're going to learn a lot. So please enjoy this interview with Nelle. Hey, did you know that we have a YouTube channel with all these podcasts and video? You get to see what's going on, what we look like when we're doing these podcasts. So if you'd like to go take a look, it's youtube.com/@thecorley company. We'll see you there. Now, if you would, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your career, and your pathway to becoming the CEO for All Faiths Food Bank.
Well, thanks, Michael. It's great to have this conversation with you. It was a joy to talk to you the first time, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing here now. I've been in this community for almost 25 years, but prior to coming here, I was up in Boston, and I was in the high-tech sector as an entrepreneur and had the great fortune to have two companies that I was able to start up with a couple of partners and run for a little bit and sell. And so came down here sort of unencumbered professionally, but certainly not retired. And grew up in a home where public service and social activism and philanthropy was in our DNA and a priority, and had always done something in the community as a volunteer, and dug in here and was afforded a number of amazing opportunities, both in Sarasota as well as nationally and internationally, to participate on boards and lead committees and chair a bunch of boards over time. Which eventually led to the opportunity to do a couple of interim CEO jobs in Sarasota itself at a time when I was kind of done with boards because I really wanted to dig in deep. And as much as I appreciate what I've learned and what I've been able to contribute, I felt like there was more. So having done those 2 years as interim CEOs at various organizations in the county, the opportunity came to apply for the job as president and CEO of All Faiths Food Bank, on whose board I had been on and chaired during COVID and Hurricane Ian, among others at the same time. And I thought there's no place I'd rather be. So along with however many hundreds of other people nationally put their hat in the ring, because it's a high profile position in the food bank world. I went through 7 months of interviewing and ultimately was given the position 2 years ago.
Well, we are blessed that you are here. And all throughout your career, you've ascended to leadership roles. And that tells me a little bit about you. And so you've done that on both the for-profit and the nonprofit sector. Can you just compare and contrast leading for-profit versus nonprofit organizations?
You know, they're both businesses. But I think that being inside here at All Faiths Food Bank has been just an amazing experience. I think that people who are working here are mission driven. I think that specifically because of what the food bank does, a lot of them have lived experience in the world of food insecurity, and they are so committed to the outcomes and the product, which is feeding people. It's very different than when you're earning that surplus for profit for, stakeholders, than when you're bringing that in here and you're gathering your resources and doing your work for the benefit of people. Not to say that for-profit businesses don't benefit people, but it's a very different angle.
And did that require a leadership change for you? So, and now you've been in the nonprofit space as interim, and you've been on boards. Go back to when you were emerging. You had sold that second company, and then you get into the nonprofit sector. I'm curious, did you have to change your approach to leadership?
Well, definitely, because I think boards are really focused on governance and very high-level oversight. They have a very different commission than the leader of a for-profit organization or a for-profit board. I actually sit on a for-profit board still now. And it's a really different thing. And it's interesting because there are some nonprofit leaders still on the for-profit board, and they handle it like a not-for-profit board, and it doesn't work in the for-profit world. But, we're really focused not on what's going to fill our own coffers, but what will allow us to expand our mission in the community. It's a really different thing. And the not-for-profit board, as I said, is a high-level governance organization versus an operating organization. And when I started working here, fortunately, I'd had a couple of years of experience inside of a not-for-profit, but, I thought I knew everything. And it was like drinking from the fire hose, as they say, because I knew nothing about the operations of this organization as much as I thought I knew. So you have to be able to let a lot go.
And that's interesting because you were a board member. And so this is a notice to all board members out there who are listening. We really don't know better. Right. And you really don't know. Right. I mean, you don't know the inner workings of the organization.
Right. Well, when staff here asks me what the board does, because it's always mysterious to not-for-profit staff, I say I report to them. They are responsible for hiring and firing me. They approve our budget, and they set sort of the very high level strategic direction of the organization, or at least sanction it. And beyond that, when they're asked to come in and work on task forces and committees that you form, et cetera, they're very specific roles that they play. They don't, not to say they don't work, because they work really hard, especially this board, but they don't do the work. We do the work. And then, and ultimately, everybody who works here is responsible to me. So, we have a very unobtrusive yet very engaged board here. It's kind of a prototype, in my opinion. It's amazing how it's evolved over the years. They're really terrific. And they really allow us to do what we need to do, but they're there for guidance and support when we need it.
Well, that is the best description I've heard of a nonprofit board relative to the staff. And it really, one can't encroach or should not encroach on the other. So you said there was an evolution of the board. Was that by design?
Yes. I mean, when I started on the board here years ago, it just didn't function properly. It was really, it was kind of stereotypical, not to be I don't want to insult anyone, because everyone was here for the right reason, but it didn't have the right governance structure. And so it wasn't unheard of that board members would walk into the warehouse in the building here and walk into people's offices and ask them for things or demand things. And, it was too heavy-handed. And I understand why that's the inclination of board members. They want to take care, they want to nurture, they want to foster, they want to do all those things. So it comes from a good place, but it doesn't work because it just doesn't work.
And that's another one of the best answers I've heard, because it doesn't, because the board members need to appreciate they have the power, the authority vested in them as a board member, and they got to be careful what they say and do, because people will take it and run with it and think it's been prescribed.
Well, I mean, they to most staff, including senior leadership who have never been on the other side of the fence, they're scary. They look like they're the boss in everybody's opinion, and they are to some extent, but I'm the conduit. So, this board has been very unobtrusive yet very supportive, and we let them in because they work the way they should, and they respect our opinions, they respect our decisions, and I've had great autonomy here. Sometimes I think partially because there's still board members on the board now that were on the board when I chaired it. So there's a little bit of that, like they're not sure sometimes where I'm coming from, but it's really been an advantage, especially for me. It's created a whole level of patience and understanding in me that I don't think existed before, because I know how they feel sitting in their seats.
Well, and that leads me to my next question. What in your experience as a board member or board chair has made you a better CEO?
I think part of it is the specific experiences that I've had in this community as well as in others, where I say this all the time, one of the greatest experiences I've had as a board member and as a chair was at the Community Foundation of Sarasota County, because it's just a unique type of organization that gives you a very high level perspective of a community ecosystem. And I think the anthropologist in me is really fascinated by the way this works. And so it's not one cause or another or one very well-defined mission. It really, because you have, over 1,000 donor advised funds. So you have 1,000 unique funds there that are not controlled by the community foundation, but are really managed by the fund donors. You see everything in the community. And then they had the Giving Challenge, which also opened up my eyes to a lot of things that you never think about. So when I came here and flipped to the other side, in fact, the first time I took an interim position, I had no idea what my network was. And all of a sudden, I started to realize I know hundreds and hundreds of people because of the experiences that I've had. And to be able to now garner that network and start attaching people and connecting things and all of that, I think that was what being on the lay leadership side gave me, in a way that as somebody who's never been in that kind of a position can't possibly have as a professional, because we're sort of isolated in a way.
Yeah. And so you mentioned your role as the interim CEO, and I'm curious, can you talk a little bit more about that? What were you charged with doing? So interim, you're there a short period of time. In both instances, it's maybe even define the amount of time. What was your role, and what did you learn from that?
So the first position was a year. The second one was about 8 months. Both were in compromised positions financially. They had leadership that was I don't want to say failed. That's not fair, but didn't meet the need of the organization. Had boards that weren't necessarily as functional as they could be, and I think the first time I was offered the opportunity, it was because I had mentioned that I had been an entrepreneur. I was known for what I had done in the nonprofit world as a lay leader, but they kind of brought me in as like the Bain capital of the not-for-profit community here, where I came in, tore it apart. I actually returned some grants, got them back on track, narrowed their mission down, and stabilized them for somebody else to come in and put their vision on it. It's a little frustrating in terms of a position when you're entrepreneurial or innovative, because you can't really apply what you think to the ongoing mission, but to hand something off to somebody or hand it back to somebody who will then nurture it and take it forward from a place where it's healthy, or at least gaining health, was very exciting to me. So I had the opportunity to do that twice. And I think that, as a result of that, I kind of came in here a little fearless, because I knew that I could take something that was wonderful to begin with, but figure out what the pieces and parts were and where it needed to grow and how it needed to grow. I came into something here that was sustainable but not scalable, and we need to scale, obviously, even in light of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And given your your experience, that makes sense that they bring you into scale. Now, so I'm curious. You go from board member of All Face, now CEO. How do you communicate with the board on a regular basis? How do you approach that interaction?
I tend to be extremely transparent, probably more transparent than I need to be, but probably at times more than I should be. So one of the things that I personally started to do when I came in was we have 6 board meetings a year, which is not a lot. And we don't see each other between, I think it was our last board meeting was in May and October. So one of the things I started to do, because, I realized I was somewhat unknown in terms of what I could do here. And I was new. I started writing monthly board updates, and I give them a ton of information, and I don't know who reads it and who doesn't, but they have not said, don't do it, please. And, it started out as monthly. Now it's started out as weekly. Now it's monthly. But, my main goal has been to allow the board to feel confident in me and comfortable that they've made the right decision. And now after 2 years, I hope they feel that way. but that, that they see the progress, that I understand the strategic plan, that I understand the fundamentals of this, and that I have the compassion, passion, and advocacy skills to bring us forward.
Yeah, and that type of communication really builds trust. I know sending that information out. And any board members listening, next time she sends one, please respond. Say thank you for sending it. Poor CEOs never know when their reports are read.
They do. I mean, this board has been outstanding. It really has.
Yeah, I've seen who's on your board. You really have a strong one. Now, I'm curious about on the day-to-day and the space that you're in, the daily challenges of food insecurity. And you came on, you wanted to address this challenge. How do you stay engaged and driven and motivated?
At the end of the day, we hand somebody an apple.
Wow.
It's really, really basic.
I bet that is rewarding.
I don't want to clutch my chest and say, but I'm a mother, so I know what it's like to feed somebody. But, this is the most fundamental basic need and inalienable right that I can imagine. You have the right to food, water, and air if you're born on this earth. And the fact is there's enough food on the earth to feed every single person everywhere, not just in this country. And we have a big logistics problem, and we have we have other problems. It's just not fair. And so I don't wake up in the morning saying I'm going to feed thousands of people today, which we do. But I do wake up in the morning saying if I reach one person with a piece of food that nurtures them and that's healthy and gets them to a place where they can potentially stand on their own 2 feet, then great. Or if I get to a person at the end of the day and I've given them nurturance and I have to do that every day to keep them going, and I can, that's great. So it's one person at a time, one day at a time.
Oh, I like that. And so you've gone from entrepreneur, you've been a board member, you've been now staff interim, those types of things. What advice would you give to any other board member who's crazy enough to think they should go into the operations side of things?
I am so grateful and honored and humbled by what I'm doing right now, that even at this mature age, after many years of quote unquote retirement, I cannot imagine doing anything else because this is what I'm passionate about. And I would say the other 2 positions that I had were not things that I wanted long-term. And I made it really clear when I went in that I was not vying for the position permanently, that I would stay there for as long as they needed me, but they needed to find somebody else. When this position became available, they were not looking for an interim. But I knew in the center of, I knew where my passion was. And I know while I've enjoyed and learned from and been challenged by all of the other things that I've done, in my philanthropic and lay leadership life, that this was the most basic and the most important thing to me, was making sure that people were taken care of. It's Maslow's hierarchy, the most basics of needs. And I have to say that while this is a complicated business and that the times are challenging and they're never not challenging, it is not hard to convince somebody that hunger is not okay.
You're exactly right about
There's
that.
no interpretation of our mission.
And your passion resonates even in this conversation. Of course, when we had breakfast not too terribly long ago, I was fascinated by it, really the passion. I'd like you to talk as we're wrapping this up. This goes back to really your childhood. You said it was really embedded in you. And so for all the parents living out there, what would you say to them raising kids, the young Nell, that impacted your life to this day?
Well, I think it's role modeling. I mean, I first of all, I was a beneficiary at the beginning of my life and ended up in a family that was socially, they cared about the world. And I don't know that my parents ever really talked to us about it, but they lived their lives like this. There were always people at our kitchen table who I didn't know. And I remember the first time I ever got allowance, it was 3 nickels. And my parents said, 1 goes into the bank, 1 you give to somebody else who needs it, and 1 you can spend on yourself. And I mean, it was just always like that. And I brought my own child up that way. And now I'm watching him, immerse himself in the world and take some responsibility for other people. We cannot do this by ourselves, and so it's just in my DNA. And I'm so grateful that I'm in a position to be able to give as much on both sides of the fence still that I have been, afforded.
Yeah. Well, you are using your time, talents, and treasures, as they say, to impact our community, and we're all better for it. And I thank you, Nell. And Nell, I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today and sharing your background and the work you're doing at All Face Food Bank. How can people find out more about All Face Food Bank?
They can go to www.allfacefoodbank.org.
And nobody gets turned away. Nobody gets turned away. Our doors are open to everybody. Well, y'all are doing special work. Nelle Miller, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, now we're moving into recapping with Reed. Reed, boy, you could feel her passion coming through the screen here. So you've got 3 takeaways. I know probably many more, but let's go with 3. Number 1.
You asked what's the difference between for-profit and nonprofits to Nell, and the first thing she said, well, they're both businesses. And I don't think a lot of people would think that first. But that is absolutely crucial. Nonprofits, you're supporting a whole staff likely. You have volunteers to report to. You have to bring revenue in. It is a business, no matter how much people want to tell you that it is a nonprofit.
Yeah, good pickup on your part, Reed. Number 2.
When Nell stepped into an interim position for a couple organizations, and even the CEO position, she served as a board member for that same organization. She said, I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing. So that just goes to show, even those who sit on the board, there's so much more that's going on in the organization that we are unaware of.
Yes, indeed. And number 3.
How she communicates with her board, she said, I am extremely transparent, probably a little too transparent. So I think that is crucial for the CEO because, like my last point, the board does not know everything that's going on. So the more that you can help them understand with what's going on, the better they can do in the role the better they can do to help serve the governance of the organization.
Yeah, and every time you add a deposit in that trust bank account, as Stephen Covey said, every time you add it, and that's what her communication does, when the time comes, you need to ask for a favor. You need to ask for trust. Trust me on this. You've at least got that bank account full. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, recapping with Reed, and we will I-501 see you next week.